We're live.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Chair Barry Bialik, and I'd like to welcome you to the August 4th, 2022 Affordable Housing Advisory Committee meeting. All committee members and staff are participating virtually. We are streaming live on our virtual engagement hub, which is accessible through the virtual engagement hub link on the front page of the city website, and also linked on the committee page. We also have an option for the public to listen and comment live by phone. Please dial 855-925-2801 and use meeting code 7663 to listen in. For those of you out there with us today, welcome. Today is we are remote today. Next meeting, I believe might be our first that's live back meeting at City Hall. So we'll continue to update from that. I believe there's some guidance that's being updated, but we are hopeful for that. We'll now go through and introduce all the committee members who are participating virtually. Please make sure to mute your microphone if you're not speaking. When you have a question or would like to speak, unmute your microphone. Please remember to mute your phone, option *6, after you are done speaking. Committee members, as I call your name, please say a quick hello. Let's see, Vice Chair Margie is not here today. Babs.
Hi, good morning.
Paul.
Good morning, Paul here.
Andy is not here today. Joe. Don't see her yet. Brian.
Hey, Lesman. Good morning, everyone.
Scott.
Morning, everyone. Scott Adams.
Dewana. Don't see her. Chris.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Chris Day.
Emily.
Hi, everyone.
Okay. Thank you. And Councilwoman Mosley reached out to me this morning and she said she has a meeting earlier. She's going to pop on when she's freed up. So she's planning to join us. Okay.
Hey, Barry, this is Dave Bartholomew. I'm here.
Okay, Dave. Sorry. Yeah. My agenda, my lists need to be, I guess my lists need to be updated over here. The ones I've got are missing, but welcome, Dave. Okay. Approval of the minutes. The draft minutes were attached to the agenda. I wasn't at the last meeting, so I'm going to let one of you, if you have a motion, to make a motion to accept them.
This is Scott. I'll make a first motion.
I'll second that.
Okay. Any discussion or comments on the minutes? I do appreciate they're a little more in depth than kind of they have been in the past. Like at least the linking, I found that much more helpful this time. So thanks, staff, for putting that together that way. And now we'll go through a quick roll call vote for accepting the minutes. Babs.
Aye.
Let's see, Paul.
Aye.
Which we haven't seen yet. Brian.
Aye.
Scott.
Aye.
Chris.
Aye.
David.
Aye.
And Emily.
Aye.
And myself, aye. Thank you so much.
Joe is on. I see.
Oh, Joe is on. Okay.
Aye.
Okay. Thanks, Joe. Welcome. All right. Thank you. Next up on our agenda, we have information about the kind of monthly housing data. So there's links to kind of the, instead of attachment this time, it's just the links on the agenda that I don't think we had the report from the Housing Authority this month because that seat is about to get reappointed. And there was the information on kind of the houses for sale, sold, and then kind of the market data report. There's been a little bit of increase of inventory, which is good, not dramatic, but a little bit less than we always used to follow the less than 275 thousand for a while. There was nothing. We had to expand that to 375 just to show that there was some inventory, and so that at least that number is increasing just a little bit. Chris.
Yeah, I know. I was looking at the same thing. I noticed that we had 5 that met the old category of 275 and below. One of those, interestingly enough, is only 336 square feet. I Googled it, and it's actually dropped down to 250 now. But
Okay. Yeah, I try when we prepare those reports, I try to knock like sometimes there's houses less than 275, less than 300 that are pretty much just dozer bait. They're just meant to get knocked down. But I usually try to not put those on the report because they're really not.
this one's interesting. It's a new construction. They're over in Oakley. There's 2 or 3 of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess it's, as there's discussion of micro apartment units now, there's in that same vein, the way to be affordable is having basically tiny houses on foundations. So it's interesting trend, and I guess we might discuss that a little bit later, at least about how the Luigi policy might come into play for discussion on smaller size units. But
Yeah, I could contribute a little bit to that from a lending lens or through a lending lens.
yeah, that would be helpful. At least we're not to the I think was it Taiwan or Hong Kong, where they pretty much have the coffin size apartments that you just basically rent a bunk. So we're not quite there yet, but I don't know if the next micro house unit might be. Okay. Any other questions on the data? It is good. Like I said, it is good to follow, good to track, and good to see that actually their inventory might shift a little bit.
Actually, a quick question. I think I saw in one of the summaries it said there was, I don't know if I saw it, was it 1.7 months of housing supply? Is that, I can't remember if I saw that number correctly, and I'm always trying to remember what a healthy metric is.
Babs, do you know? I think Babs, do you know what's considered, what would be considered a healthy metric of available MLS inventory?
I could not give that offhand, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think it's usually like, is it 3 months?
That sounds,
Yeah.
that's more the metric I was thinking. So
Yeah.
just what I noticed.
Yeah, I think that's what I can recall, like from articles I've read. I think that 3 month to 3 to 4 months is kind of what is considered healthy. And I didn't look at the total overall amount of listings. I think that has increased just a little bit, and that's a a good sign.
Sure.
Next up, about the housing calculator. It looks like is Paul, you want to kind of fill us in? Has there been an update on that?
Yeah, I think we're just trying to have it kind of be more accurate. And we're trying to kind of move the interest rates around to match what's appropriate. But that's a tough one because just a few years ago, interest rates, used to tell folks like, well, we got a lock. It might change. Your rate could change. If you don't lock this week, and now it's like, oh well, your rate could change if you don't lock this minute. So every little announcement, things are just so. Everyone's just kind of tense, the market tense, and so what happens is every little announcement affects mortgage-backed securities, and so we're not going to be 100% accurate all the time on this, but we're going to just try to update this information more frequently and get as close as we can. So we're because this information is only helpful if it's accurate, right? And it can actually, like so many things, can be damaging when it's not. So
Can I ask sorry, can I ask a question about that? So I was looking at the calculator and I saw that the user, whoever visits the page, can change the rate. Are we wanting to change the default setting? Like the default setting, I think right now is like 5%. Or is it that we want to change the default setting on that calculator more frequently or have some guiding advice? But whoever actually uses it can change it as they want, depending on what deal they're getting. And I'm asking because just if we wanted to set it up where like every month we email you and ask you like what should we change it to, whatever. But it wasn't clear to me.
Yeah, let's do that. We kind of said ahead of each meeting maybe, or just on some kind of schedule. I'd love to do that. I'm thinking through just right now, like what the advantages and drawbacks of locking the interest rate in there to where it can't be changed versus, certainly someone's credit score and the loan type, and there's so many things that impact, lots of data points that impact credit score. So it's the last 30-year, right? Yes. So I think I don't know. If you had cash, you could even buy the interest rate down. So then if you knew that, you could lower the interest rate based on what we're sharing. I'm torn. I can't land on one side or the other clearly on whether we should allow that to be modified by the user or not.
Could I jump real quick?
Yeah, please.
Well, just somebody who's been part of the home buying process for the last year, I think it would be helpful to be able to move the scale up and down just based on, which mortgage I would go with or which mortgage rate I'd go with. So that'd be better.
So, am I hearing that we would want to be able to let the user modify it, but maybe give more information and data to help them guide them on?
Maybe that's that's how it's set up right now. You actually can change how much you're putting down. You can't change the 30-year period, but you can change down payment, home price, household size, and mortgage rate.
We may be maybe getting into something that's quite a lot more sophisticated than what we have, just because like a pricing engine that a bank or any mortgage lender would use would take into account lots of data points like loan to value or down payment amount and so many others. Certainly it exists because that's what we use in the industry to price loans, but I don't know that we're going to find that in a calculator. And I would say even big banks, their websites that have calculators aren't that sophisticated. So,
and we can talk about this offline if you want. I guess the reason I opened up this up because I'm not sure if you all want to talk about this at every meeting or just get an update like you're getting housing data updates, like here's where interest rates are. But because right now there's nothing that I see to change on the calculator except that default setting. So we can do that without it coming through AHAC and just kind of let AHAC know here's where it's at or here's what's going on kind of thing.
I think it could be helpful, when I looked at the calculator last night just to see what it currently was like. If there was, because I say to Emily's point, it's I don't know if we have to go as far as hey, if you're going with a 3-year, a 3-year adjustable, the interest rate is this, or because there's so many fluctuations. But I wonder if there's just a text rider to the calendar that said, hey, the average, for this month, an update that's rather than update the default, it's just a text rider that says this month the interest rate, the 30-year fixed interest rate is 5 point something percent, a 3-year ARM is 4 point something percent. That way it has the variables that they can update, and that way we don't have to update the formula, but just update a text box. Yeah, Sasha, do you want to have a standing meeting, you and I, where we just it wouldn't take us long, just jump on and have a quick call and update anything that we see necessary. Sure.
We're definitely going to change it every time. I feel recently the good news, right, is that interest rates have gone down a little bit. We're still, compared to a couple of years ago, very, very high, much higher. But I would be certainly willing to have us a meeting where we could correct that on a monthly basis, I guess.
Okay, and I agree. I like your idea, Barry. I think we can do that some text.
Yeah. Kind of it could be just be kind of the same way we send in the reports. Paul can send in a report for the month that says with whatever the parameters are that we want to update. That way he can just we can just update the pick which ones you want, and then we can just update those automatically. That way that's because it's fluctuating so much. Have you seen much movement towards 40-year rates to 40-year yet, Paul, to help bring?
No,
not yet.
That'd be pretty cool. But no.
What have you found for but like a buy down? What are they like to buy down? Like if you're trying to buy down an interest rate by a full point, like a percent, how much would you say that costs now?
Yeah, I mean, it depends. It's based on the purchase price,
Yeah.
or the loan amount rather. So, so it's cost prohibitive generally. But if we're using grant funds or down payment assistance funds, I think it can make sense still.
Yeah. I think that's where I was
but
going.
in the thousands, generally.
Yeah, that's where I was going with it. I was trying to look, like I've been trying to analyze some of the down payment assistance. Obviously we've kind of missed the boat where down payment assistance itself for down payment helps because the interest rates are so down. But if like there's a way any of the down payment money can be used to buy down interest rates, because that gives a lot more buying power. So just be curious to see like what
it does.
Yeah.
Yeah. The kind of the three things that I say we look at are the debt to income ratio, the loan to value, which is the down payment, and the credit score and history. And the loan to value is the one that we focus on, of course, through down payment assistance, but with interest rates increasing, of course, you're speaking to this, debt to income ratio, and it is hugely impactful, and it was reduced everyone's buying power. But of course, in these lower price ranges for these specific borrowers that need affordable housing, it's like much more impactful for them, so I think we had discussed that briefly. It was a great idea that you're having on that, I think. And I think it could be explored. It'll have to do maybe with there may be some regulatory stuff in there, but also like the groups that are offering the funds need to be okay with it.
Yeah.
So
I just think it's going to come up a little bit more, like the idea of using down payment assistance or grant funds for buying down interest rates and then prepaying PMI. Those are the items that give the most buying power. So
one of the tricks that we used to do, and I haven't seen it in a while now, is if it made sense and it got us a little higher loan amount potential, we could increase the interest rate a little bit, not decrease, but increase. And then, the opposite is true. Like when you buy it down, you spend money to buy the rate down. But if the interest rate's elevated a little bit, you get a lump sum of money, and you can use that to pay off your mortgage insurance in advance in a lump sum rather than monthly. You can also pay mortgage insurance all in one whack at closing. But with interest rates so high, and we already have the issue of the debt to income ratio, that's a little less useful. But if we could use down payment assistance or other funds like that to pay off the mortgage insurance, then we're usually, in a lot of cases, we're talking about, depending on the loan to value, if we have like a 97% loan, we might be talking about $130 to $150 a month, which that's tens of thousands of dollars more in borrowing power just that we can shift over.
Exactly. That's what I was just trying to think of. How do I start spending so much time on this discussion? But how to align is like, here we've got the possibility of a little bit more inventory opening up, but now we have mortgage products that give less buying power. So where may best we could maybe layer in what's remaining of some city funds for grants for taking advantage of additional inventory and giving them more buying power, whether it's not through traditional down payment assistance, but through interest rate buy downs and prepaid PMIs, and to basically give them more bandwidth, or else. So okay. Cool. Well, thanks. Yes, it's been fascinating to watch the mortgage industry the past couple of months.
Yeah, it's wild.
Yeah. All right. Thank y'all. Any other comments or thoughts on that?
And do you actually track how many people go to this page and use it?
Yeah, that question got asked, and so I touched base with our IT department, and it looks like there was, and I'm not sure when it went live, but October 21, there's 160 people, November 21, 355, and then from December onward till now, it's been about an average of 40 a month. And so it's hard to tell if that's 5 people going there a bunch of times, or is it 1 person a day? But yeah, I did check on that. So
Good. Thanks. Yeah, it's good to know the tools get used. But thank you. All right. Any other questions, comments on that? All right, cool. So we'll I guess you guys can connect offline, and then we can do whatever that text, however you want to do the monthly update on that. I think that'd be really helpful. Good ideas. Okay, next up, we have the section of the agenda says HCD committee monthly information sharing, and we're going to have an update on the city council committee work plans from HCD and from Assistant City Manager Rachel Wood. So I think she's here with us, so we'll look for an update. Thank you.
Yeah, good morning, everyone, and thank you, Barry. So this is going to be a continuation of the conversation that we had at the July meeting. With one note, at the July meeting, our plan was to discuss the Housing and Community Development Committee's work plan at their July meeting, which would have been a week and a half, essentially, after AHAC met. And due to some time-sensitive items that needed to make the agenda in July, we have not yet had the formal discussion with HCD on what the content of their work plans is going to be. So HCD wanted to be the pilot committee where we look at really planning out over the next year, what are those key policy areas that the City Council Committee would be reviewing. And so conceptually, they are wanting to be that pilot to then potentially replicate with other City Council committees. We are going to have that more substantive conversation in August around what specifically they want to cover. So I think this is actually a really good opportunity, though. Sasha's going to go into some of the specific topics with this group to get your feedback so we can use that to then inform the presentation that we have later this month with the Housing and Community Development Committee. Since it has been a couple of weeks, though, since the presentation we had in early July, I'm going to go through a couple of the same slides that we went through last month, just as a quick refresher. So as a reminder, council committees were established to review policy matters and make policy recommendations. And then city council strategic priorities inform what each council committee should focus on throughout the fiscal year. Annual work plans will then serve as a useful tool to plan for and better organize the work of city council committees, and committee work plans will also include specific assignments for advisory boards, which will then be used to inform future policy recommendations from the council committees. The development of advisory board work plans will also help ensure alignment with city council committees and facilitate advanced planning for future meeting agendas. And so we'll kind of go into what that process would look like over the course of the next couple of slides. So as a quick reminder, the City Council back in 2019 established the city's vision. It's very broad, aspirational, and multi-year focused. Also during 2019, vision focus areas were established. These provide a little more specificity around that broad vision statement. And then as I mentioned in the key takeaways, each fiscal year, the City Council adopts their strategic priorities. And those strategic priorities are really focused on how are we going to operationalize that vision for the upcoming fiscal year. And as staff, we take that as direction on the work that we're doing, the items that we're putting in our organizational work plan should be directly tied to those City Council strategic priorities. And if they're not aligned, then we need to have that discussion of is that really something we should be working on if it's not aligned with City Council's priorities. As a part of the retreat that we had with the City Council back in March, we made a commitment to have more regular feedback sessions with the City Council, letting them know about the status of projects, initiatives, policy review that was underway that directly align with City Council's strategic priorities. And we really viewed using the City Council committees as one of the primary vehicles for being able to communicate the status and let Council know updates on the work that's happening within the space of each of their strategic priorities. And so that's really the genesis of this work plan, is how do we actualize City Council's priorities, and then using the advisory boards as well as the city's internal organizational work plan as a way to really ensure that we're structuring our work and reporting back to council so that they understand the work that's happening and the progress that's being made within each of their priority areas. Next slide, please, Sasha. So just to get a little more detailed into the committee work plan concept. So as I already mentioned, the City Council each year reviews and approves their strategic priorities, and there's typically overlap from year to year. So for example, both last year and this year, reimagining public safety and reparations were replicated because there's still a lot of policy review work happening in both of those spaces. But then there were some new strategic priorities such as neighborhood resilience and the expand core services strategic priority. Those were new items in addition to carrying forward some of the items where there was still a lot of work underway. So those strategic priorities then inform council committee work plans, which will outline key areas of focus throughout the fiscal year. And then the committee work plans will assign specific projects, programs, and policy areas for advisory boards to research and work through during the fiscal year. Advisory work plans and their associated agendas will then be worked centered on work assigned from City Council committees. Of course, that's not the only content of your agendas, but the policy review work should have some direct alignment with what is on the Council committee work plans. And then we wanted to provide an opportunity for advisory boards to regularly report their progress on these policy areas that have been assigned and discussed by the Housing and Community Development Committee in AHAC's case. And then also to provide feedback on future considerations that HCD as well as AHAC may want to be looking at, either adding to future work plans. And we do envision work plans being dynamic. So it may be, if there's something particularly given what's happening with the market that may take precedent over what we originally had planned in the work plan, we just want to use the work plan as a management tool and rebalance based on staff availability and really what is that top priority to ensure we're moving the needle in this advisory board's case towards making more affordable housing available throughout the community. So then City Council committees would use feedback from the advisory boards, taking your policy recommendations and approving those at the committee level, and then taking them to full City Council for consideration. Next slide, please. So here's a quick example. We went through this last time. Of course, we've got the council's strategic priority of equitable and affordable housing and stability. And then that most directly aligns with City Council Committee of Housing and Community Development. Of course, it touches on other committees as well. And so I do want to note that nothing is mutually exclusive. And so there will be instances where we have multiple topics reported at multiple committees. And as we're piloting this, I can't exactly explain to you how that's going to work, but we know that no item is something that it will likely touch multiple council committees and multiple strategic priorities. So kind of working through this example, so you have HCD as the committee, and then the work plan topic would be update affordable housing policies. And then from there, HCD might make a specific recommendation to have AHAC review the land use incentive grant policy and develop recommended revisions. So from there, this advisory board would review, make recommendations, report back on a quarterly or more regular, if necessary, basis to HCD on your findings. From there, of course, Sasha will be working with you. We'll make staff recommendation as well. And then ultimately, the goal would be to have the Housing and Community Development Committee agree upon a list of recommended revisions to the policy for then full City Council to review and adopt. So that would be kind of how that flow would potentially work. Again, whenever you have your quarterly meetings with the council committees, you can also talk about future considerations that we may want to add to future work plans, or look at potentially revising our work plan based on the areas of highest need, given what's happening in the market and in the community as well. Next slide, please. So next steps, as I mentioned, we weren't able to have that more specific conversation with the Housing and Community Development Committee back in July on what those policy areas might be. So we are still working through developing what that work plan will look like. And at the August 16th HCD meeting, we'll be reviewing the draft work plan and then hopefully receiving feedback from HCD members on what those potential assignments would be for policy review, both for staff as well as for the advisory boards. And so so we hope that by September 20th, HCD will adopt their work plan. In my perfect world, they would adopt it in August, but we want to make sure to have time to incorporate their feedback and also have an opportunity to report back to you on where we land at that August 16th meeting. And then I know there's been some discussion around AHAC potentially having a retreat. I believe you all do some level of work planning already. So we would want you to finalize what your work plan for fiscal year 2022, 2023 would be sometime between September and October. And then, as I mentioned, have that quarterly report back to the HCD committee on the status of the policy review items that you're working on. And so our hope is to replicate this model, take lessons learned, maybe make some tweaks, especially as we start talking through how do we handle those topics that hit on maybe multiple strategic priorities or might be appropriate for multiple city council committees or advisory boards to be reviewing, and then look at rolling out work plans for council committees and then advisory boards later in the fall. So that's kind of a high-level overview of the process. Sasha is going to get into some of the specifics of what we're looking at recommending for City Council's HCD committee. Of course, we're going to have some ongoing items, and those are going to be the routine applications that we have coming through for land use incentive grant. But then there's also those policy review areas. So maybe before we transition to Sasha, are there questions just conceptually at a high level about how this process might work? And then Sasha can go through what those policy areas and ongoing items are that we're going to be proposing for the HCD work plan. If there are no questions, I can turn it over to Sasha.
Great, thanks, Rachel. So yeah, just as Rachel just said, this is a list of kind of ongoing items at HCD. We just wanted to provide that as background for you all. Also, as background, here are some items that are, specific, not ongoing items that we know are going to HCD at some point in the coming fiscal year. So, there are items that are more concerned with that HIAC would be more involved in, or the home consortium. I have here the missing middle housing study, which Videla will talk a little bit about later on, and the community benefits table. Planning and urban design are the lead department on those. So we don't have as much information about those today. I talked to Todd a little bit about this yesterday. They will definitely be started this year. It's not clear if they'll be finished this year, but that, AHAC will be involved in those items. And then we have these four kind of bigger things that we're going to propose to HCD, and we're really today bringing it to you as draft and to see what you think about it. And they're all things that we've talked about in both this committee and at HCD and even at City Council. So the four things are the allocation plan for the remainder of our bond dollars, a housing trust fund policy review and possible revisions, right? LaWeege policy review and revisions, and then the affordable housing strategies update. So that's that 2008 plan. So let me tell you why I put these timeline the way we've got it. So our bond allocation is our most time sensitive item. We want to be issuing going to the LGC, the local government commission, and working on issuing the bonds next spring, which means we want a solid plan that we've developed this fall and winter. The idea here is that we would take a general plan, and I should also say the idea is to bring it to you all next month, then go to HCD and City Council. And a part of that plan, we're thinking that it's actually transferring a large chunk of that money into the Housing Trust Fund. Now, the Housing Trust Fund policies, it was updated a couple years ago, I think. I'm not sure how much it was updated, but we are finding that there are oftentimes, or people are asking for exceptions here and there. Different parts of the policy aren't working. And what I'd like to do is really kind of take a look at that policy and get it in a little bit better shape before, and then we would put out a call for that bond allocation for those dollars through the Housing Trust Fund program. And we've also discussed trying to line this up better with the county process as well. So what that would mean is that this fall, we would really prioritize looking at the Housing Trust Fund policy. And Kate Pett and I have, from Thrive, and I have met a couple of times since your last meeting. And I think that Thrive is willing to really focus their project on this and help us with some of that community input, like doing an equitable policy review. They're working with our equity and inclusion department. So I feel like it's really helpful for staff. So it won't be just staff alone, it'll be Thrive, AHAC, we would be working with other stakeholders, getting feedback, and you all would be hearing all of that. So that's why it's timed that way. And then we would come back to Luigi for a full policy review in the winter time. And then the ongoing kind of the plan update, which I know some folks have been working on in a couple different forums, maybe I don't know if it's the Connect or the Build Task Force. I know that the Success Equation folks have also been talking about it. That's, I went through that plan more thoroughly this last month, and it's a big document, and we would want to narrow the focus a bit just to be on the affordable housing part and not the homelessness part. And I've discussed that with Emily Ball. So I think it's important to do, and it could, it would influence future policy changes. But what we wanted to do is, and I will come back to this in just a second. What we wanted to do is ask your feedback is like, what are your top priorities? Any feedback you have on this table of, how this is timed out, and then is there anything missing from this list? And how can AHAC engage with these? Is it because you only have one meeting a month, it's 2 hours, and we've got other things happening too. Could we use one of your task force meetings? Is it, creating like for the Housing Trust Fund policy, let's just say, for example, is it creating a small group from here of folks who are willing to help outside of AHAC meetings? I'm not sure. So I'll go back to this, and Rachel, go ahead.
Yeah, just to actually build off of the point you just raised, Sasha, one of the important notes about the work plan process that we're conceptualizing right now is that we're really looking at a 1-year snapshot of what we can do within this fiscal year, understanding that some things are going to take multiple fiscal years to complete. So the complete overhaul of that 2008 study might be something that potentially would take more than the course of a full fiscal year to complete. But for the work plan itself, we're looking at what could we do between now and June 30th, 2023 in order to ultimately get to a place where we're able to complete that full review and update to that policy. So just wanted to make sure that we're kind of looking at this, understanding that some of these things may take a long time to complete. The purpose of the work plan is to make sure we've identified some measurable outcomes that we think that we could achieve this specific fiscal year.
Thanks. So yeah, would love to open it up, and Barry or whoever would like to.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, this is fantastic. Yeah, I mean, what we've always been wanting for, we've been asking for is the connection, the connection and guidance from council and committees, so we can all be on the same page. So we're not coming up with stuff that then that's not what they want. So no, this is beautiful, and it's reminiscent of what things were pre-COVID. Honestly, it's like we used to come up with when council would have the retreat about affordable housing, we would come up with what we said was our committee priorities for affordable housing. Council or the subcommittee would, the HCD committee would then vote on and decide which were ones, and then we would have our plan for the year. And that's what that's really what we just haven't had for 2 to 3 years. So yeah, and I like that this formalizes that, and then it knows that we keep in sync with what the committee we report to, I look at we report to which is HCD. So I think this is fantastic, and those are all great ways how to put it into biteable pieces. The bond, the Housing Trust Fund, the Luigi, and then the 2008 plan. I love it. I'm real excited to see this and have some formal process for how to connect with our with council. Any other committee members want to chime in and thumbs up, applause?
Yeah, I echo that. Like, definitely feels like we have had in the past some disconnect, and here we are, like, really aligning. And setting some expectations for ourselves and for our relationship with council. I would maybe, when we talk about policy review and in the context of a work group, I can't see either of our current work groups taking this on. It kind of feels like a whole new thing, whole new work group. But yeah, thank you everyone for your hard work on this. This is wonderful. This feels really good, like productive.
And I do want to acknowledge, one of those questions was what's missing, that there will be other things that come up. And if we have a retreat, there will be other things that you all want to look at that aren't here. And it's not to say that those can't happen, but I think this is, the Housing Trust Fund policy is going to be kind of like, it's a kind of a big thing. It's going to take a lot.
Yeah, I agree, because that'll take, getting stakeholders, so many stakeholders to bring up that conversation, especially those who have tried to use it and what their, what the pros and cons are. So that there's definitely deep discussion about each. And then it feels more realistic, because the scope of trying to solve affordable housing once a month it's a huge task. So if we can feel more successful if we say, well, we're going to tackle these 4 or 5 things this year, and then have the guidance and connection and support of council is great. And so yeah, I do appreciate this. And then this also then, for us as committee members, besides connecting with city council, I think this also helps us show what we need to focus on outside the direct connection just to city council, meaning the how do I put it, like we recently, 3 of our committee members recently spoke at city council about the open space, and we came in through the lens of affordable housing, and that I think had a really big impact, because it shows how that the affordable housing voice, which is what our committee represents, kind of gets lost sometimes in the I don't know, the pro side of it, gets lost in the balance of some other issues. So it helps us as a committee focus what's important, like these items, and then how we support these to council, but how we support these to other committees, whether it's like going to planning and zoning meetings or city council. So I think this is fantastic. So that means, for timing for what we look at for our retreat, then we should be looking for that after the kind of the HCD plan gets adopted. Is that what the thinking is?
And that would be September, we're hoping at the latest. So realistically, knowing that we're already in August, you can start planning for your retreat now, and in all likelihood by September 20th, which is the date that we're hoping to have the HCD committee's work plan. As long as you schedule it sometime after that, there should be no issue with there being conflicting information or something changing on the committee's work plan.
And that's, so yeah, I guess it would be good for what at the HCD meeting coming up then, should any of us take an active role in participating in that conversation, like being at the meeting, or should we just observe it at that point and then discuss it afterwards? What do you think would be more beneficial?
That's a great idea, Barry. Honestly, I think it would be fantastic if you are supportive of these being what you view as the top policy review areas that need to be focused on this fiscal year. I think it would be fantastic maybe for one or a couple of you to make public comment. I do want to note, of course, in the previous slide, we've got other advisory boards, of course, that report up to HCD as well. So I would want to have, if we made a specific opportunity for you to present, I would want the chair of HIAC to be able to present, and then any other represented advisory boards. So I would maybe recommend using the public comment, but I think there's definitely benefit to you all listening in on the conversation. And then I think it's kind of a nice show of solidarity if you do make a few comments around what your support for those being the key policy areas from the affordable housing lens that we should be focusing on this year.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, that sounds fair. So yeah, I'd recommend our committee members to kind of follow as close as you can the HCD meeting, and then so rather than us necessarily participate, just kind of listen and then be, to chime in at the end for public comment. And is HCD is that a live meeting or is that a remote meeting?
I believe the August meeting will still be remote, and then we'll be going live after that.
Okay.
And I do just really quickly want to thank you all for being such willing guinea pigs as we test this out. And so my last comment in all of this is we know this isn't going to be perfect, but it's a step, I think, in the right direction, to your point, Barry, around kind of reestablishing that direct connection back between the committees and the advisory boards. So please give us your feedback either to Sasha or to me directly, because we want to make sure we take lessons learned from what we're piloting with you all to improve the process across the city with all of our council committees and advisory boards. So thank you again.
How would you say this lines up, like, because there's this, which is, I think beautiful. And then the kind of overall, there's this other committee going on about kind of a whole, how to redo all these committees like that. How do we look at, like, because they almost feel not like, I don't know, like they're happening parallel, but it doesn't feel that that's going to be productive. Like the other meeting feels like it might not be as productive. Of here, we're trying to pilot something, but then there's this other discussion going on, like what should committees look like? How should we reconcile that? Like, how do we explain what we're doing with what this other big conversations going on, which is proving to be rather controversial?
Yeah, that's a really good question and something we've thought a lot about. So you're spot on that they're kind of parallel tracks, that once we have recommendations from that working group who's looking at boards and commissions more holistically, once we have their recommendations, which I believe should be in September, we'll kind of look at how do we merge some of that. What's not going to change is us wanting to have more direct connection between the advisory boards and the city council committees. But what might change is that alignment between different boards and commissions back to the city council committees. And if it is a recommendation to potentially merge certain groups, of course, that would be a consideration. But this process that we're piloting, I don't necessarily see that changing. It just might be that the makeup of certain boards and commissions might potentially change, or their alignment to council committees might potentially change as a result of any recommendations that come from that working group and are ultimately approved by city council. So I see this kind of happening regardless of what those recommendations are, just because we want to be able to replicate this and make sure advisory boards have the same opportunity that AHAC is now going to have some structured opportunities to report back directly to the city council committees. And then the question just will be from the working groups and then ultimately the approval of city council. Will there be any changes to the existing makeup of advisory boards that we have?
Yeah, I do see, at least in there's the one thing I see, there's a little bit of like, because the media, I mean, it has been picked up, the whole idea about the committee, the whole idea of redoing the boards and commissions. And I think it's put kind of some mixed messages out there. And what I was looking at specifically for us is we had open seats that were advertised, and we had really minimal new applications, and we usually have a fair amount of new ones. So I think from what I recall, I mean, the application pool was rather limited this time, and most of them were ones who had applied over the past year. And I think I recall there's only like there's maybe just 2 applicants in this new cycle, like from July and August. And I was kind of disappointed to see that, but I can also see, well, yeah, there's some mixed messaging out there about whether boards and committees are being around. So how much effort would I want to kind of do to volunteer my time if we're not sure if it's going to be around? So I hope we can kind of get to some, get the path going so we can be more clear to the public, so we can engage and involve people in, because like I said, I was pretty disappointed about like our pool, not disappointed in our pool, but the volume of the pool we have. We usually have had sometimes 30 to 40 applications to kind of go through. And I think, like I said, I think there was only 2 new ones. And then there was about, I think 5 or 6 that have been around over the past year. So it's kind of limited. So it makes it harder for us to be diverse, which is what we really want as our committee, is to stay diverse. And I think I recall, no offense, Paul, but I think on this application round, 3 or 4 of our, like almost half of the applicants were mortgage like mortgage people. So it kind of it makes it hard for us to kind of keep our diversity and meet our guidelines of what our committee is supposed to be. So we'll talk about that a little later about kind of what we want to do with our seat, if we want to move forward with our pool, or if we need to recast, or we'll talk about that later. But thank you for all the work that has gone into this, and we're certainly excited to be part of this process. Any other committee members want to chime in, or we'll plan to, I think some of us will definitely plan to watch HCD and contribute where we can.
I will add this slideshow to your materials folder, and then if for some reason you want to go back and look at it, and if you, like Rachel said, if you want to send any comments to herself or myself, that'd be welcome.
Okay. Super. All right. Thanks, everybody. Next up, we're in our updates and reports section. So I think we have, let's see, I think Vidila, and then I think I saw Jeffrey on, so we'll get to them. So I appreciate them joining us. Vidila, if you want to kind of fill us in on this missing middle study, we're all excited to hear about it.
Sure. So as you probably know, Council has given our department $85,000 to conduct a missing middle housing study. So we are just the very beginning parts of that process, where we're beginning to talk internally about what the process should look like. This is before we're even hiring consultants. And we're talking about potentially putting together an advisory committee that would help sort of guide staff in thinking about the scope of work that we ultimately use to issue an RFP. And any other questions? What should the RFP, or what should the scope of work be, and like that, those types of issues. I want to give you all a document that I'm putting in the chat here, and I'll go ahead and share my screen just to talk through a couple of things. There was this is, I think, sort of a similar document of what we might be looking for our missing middle housing study. This particular report was done in Greensboro, and they call it, this is from the firm in the Bay Area named Opticos. Their founder is the one who coined the missing middle term. For those of you who don't know the term, it refers to a block of housing that we basically have lost, that hasn't been created. Before the 20s, lots of housing was like in the Montford area. You had single family homes, duplexes and triplexes next to each other, some small apartment buildings. But really after the 20s, as zoning sort of took a hold of a lot of separation of uses, we got single family house, the creation of single family homes, and sort of apartment complexes. What's missing, the missing middle, is everything in between that, from duplexes to small apartment buildings. So this report looks at city of Greensboro, and you can look at it at your own time. I just want to sort of highlight one thing that they do that I think could be really helpful. They have this summary of barriers, and what you can see in this chart, they list different zoning districts in this community, and then they have marks. An X is a barrier, question mark means it's unclear, and then a green check mark means it enables all types of missing middle housing, which is this soft density of housing types that provide more housing choice, but fit within the context of our residential communities. And so we might see something like this in Asheville, where they review our density and our lot sizes, lot setbacks, and give us a third party's perspective and view of what are our zoning barriers. And even some of the non-zoning. You can see here they have fire. It says fire sprinklers required for 3 or more units, and you can see that's a barrier in 3 of the zoning districts that they're reviewing. Here's some more, heights. And so that's kind of the big overview. We're just kicking this off, and we'll keep you up to date on what's happening. And if you have any comments at this point, feel free to let me know.
So, sorry, did you say it's an I missed that. Is it an RFP or has it been appointed to someone to do that yet?
No, we're gonna go through a procurement process to hire a company.
Okay.
So that hasn't happened yet. We haven't even finalized the scope of work.
Got it. Okay.
We're thinking of possibly posting, because there's so much interest in housing and how this might affect the development of housing and what it looks like. It's also the design of our community. We're thinking of creating a web page for this so the public can see what's going on, and possibly even having some type of a survey that allows the public to chime in potentially before we even issue the RFP, so that we make sure that we're including in the scope and in the contract things that the community is pushing for. We think we understand that, but in trying to be as open and transparent as we can, we might do a little bit more.
What do you see as the timelines for all this?
Haven't thought that through much. I think really we're just starting this, so we're trying to get some internal agreement on some of our process. But I could imagine, let's see, we're basically in August, so probably sometime at maybe the end of this month, we would have sort of a public web page for this. We'd probably finalize the scope and put it out there, in the fall, early fall, September, October, and probably try to get moving on this, depending on that process, either at the end of the year or first part of 23.
So do you think so that means the RFP would be kind of more like an issue after all the public input? So the potential of a contract actually being sought out is probably more like beginning of next year, you think? Or
I think we're hoping to issue a contract, you're right. So we're going to issue an RFP probably sometime in the fall to hopefully get a consultant on board in order to begin work at the end of this year or the beginning of next. And, the timeline would probably be a 9-month to 12-month project.
Okay. Yeah, just trying to understand the timeline of that, because because it's a big discussion we've all had pieces of, but I hate to say it gets stuck. There's a lot of procedure to go. It's a lot of procedure. So that means before it gets out, the discussion of what is needed before it goes out to contract, and then goes out to contract, and then waits for RFP, and then the work gets done. Yeah. So we're really talking a year to year and a half, at least a year away, or a year and a half
for completion.
Yeah, until we have stuff to make decisions off of.
Right. Yeah, probably a year to a year and a half before we can begin to make changes to our code.
Yeah. Wow.
Now, hopefully between now and then we can look at some low-hanging fruit and see if there are some code or other changes that we can do. But that'll depend on staff capacity and other goals, because we're juggling lots of things right now.
Yeah. Brian?
Yeah, it just strikes me that we're starting with this hypothesis that our problem with housing is a structural one around this missing middle type of housing. And I'm not sure that's entirely the case. We have a limited amount of geography that's buildable within the city limits. And so, our concern might be, our issue might be that we're not doing enough multifamily housing space for larger complexes and converting smaller lots, several small lots into bigger plots that could be have higher density. And so you're going to spend a year all chasing a hypothesis that could be wrong. That's my biggest concern, because we're not looking at this holistically and saying, hey, we have a physical footprint, we have a shortage of housing, how to best address it. We're just saying, oh, like, hey, there aren't as many duplexes there used to be. Let's go figure out why there aren't duplexes. I mean, so we might figure out, oh yeah, the duplexes went away, but maybe duplexes aren't the solution.
Scott?
And a year and a half will have passed.
Well, let me just chime in before Scott goes. One thing that we do know is that 2/3 of our residential property is zoned single family, which means that 2/3 of our residential property excludes many types of housing options. So your point is well taken, that that's an important, this isn't to undermine the production of larger properties. And developers will still look to acquire and to put together larger parcels to make those projects happen, because they don't work in the business of duplexes. Some developers only want to look at 100+ apartments. But we know that there is, at least through the particular lens of our current zoning that we've inherited, a significant deficiency in the regulations that undermine more housing options in the bulk of residential districts.
Why don't we just move more expediently to change that zoning? Because we know that's the answer at the end. I don't need to wait a year and a half to tell you that, oh goodness, 2/3 of our plots are single family zoned.
I wonder, Brian,
it just seems like $85,000 of funds and a long term to come up with an answer we already know today.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking when he was talking about Brian, when he was going through what he was saying, like a lot of this is it's almost like, I hate to say it, we probably need to align with them and build, because essentially we've done this. I feel like that's what we've been doing the past years is a missing middle study. And so we've already spoken with half of I think we've been talking about this in this committee pretty much specifically a lot about missing middle for the past year. And we've interviewed so many of the stakeholders. I wonder if there's some kind of alignment we should have a meeting with planning, I think, because we've been talking about what is our next steps. Okay, we've got all this meetings, we've had all these discussions. We certainly have identified some low-hanging fruit. So I wonder if we need to just kind of have planning come to our next build meeting and then kind of go over what we've come through, because yeah, I sure feel like a lot of what you might be looking to come through this missing middle study, we've already interviewed all these stakeholders and have done a lot of this. So I wonder if we might be able to speed this process up by sharing the pieces, sharing some of our recommendations for lowest hanging fruit. And, as I've always said, one of our lowest hanging things, lobby MSD to change their sewer policies, because if MSD was allowed to extend their own sewer lines, that would sure solve a lot of that stuff. And so there's a lot of issues that are so specific to our region that we've done a lot of this work on. So maybe that's what I'll recommend is having Vidilla probably come to our next build meeting, and we can kind of go over our notes and what we've done to see if there's any way that might speed up this process, so we're not having to wait for a consultant to tell us a year from now what we already kind of know. Scott.
I'll let Paul speak.
Go, Paul, sir.
Yeah, a lot of good points here. Everybody, I can see everyone making some really valid points. I think what sticks out is the development that I am seeing. You use Montfort as an example, where you've got all different types of housing for all different types of people. I don't see that happening. I don't know that I can think of any example of it. And it's beautiful. That is really good development. So anyway, I just want to pull that out of there, frame it up and see if there's a way to move toward that, or just highlight it.
I think that's the goal, is more housing choices in more communities, so that you can live in a small scale neighborhood and feel like you don't have to have a single family home. You might be an elderly person or a young person who wants to live in a small building that's a triplex or a very small apartment complex on a normal street, not in a new development that's got a huge parking lot and 200 apartments. So more housing choices, I think, is the way of looking at it within more communities in Asheville.
One example comes to mind, and it's in the works, not anywhere near completed, but and it's not in the city, it's in the county, but the Olivet Agri-Hood has some really amazing plans. And of course, being built around the farm is a special thing too. But yeah, it's cool. I'm glad we're talking about this. This is, I think, the study and what we're researching here, it's very valid and valuable. We're just kind of pointing it in a more laser focused direction, right? And the meeting with the build, I hope you can make that. I'm not on the building committee, I'm on Connect, but I sure hope that can happen, because we do have a lot of information, a wealth of knowledge in this group.
Thank you.
Any other comments?
I guess I would just add, because I'm pretty sensitive to it, and I know Badilla will know this, but just so you all know, I think the legacy neighborhoods, Todd and I have engaged with them over the last couple of years, and that's Shiloh, Burton Street, East End, Valley Street, Emma, include Emma in that, in South Side. Those folks have a very different view of all these things. And so I totally get it. And we do need choices and we need all kinds of housing types. But oftentimes what that means is that investors come in and build that, and it can fuel gentrification. So I think we have to be really sensitive to that. And it's not really a one size fits all. And we've had there was a woman here from the Twin Cities who talked about that and how they implemented those changes to multifamily and really taking into some of those considerations with different neighborhoods. So.
Definitely. Thank you, Sasha. And maybe the scope of work calls that out specifically.
Yeah, there's definitely been, and you've been part of the meeting, Rodilla, with the Home Builders Association has been having meetings with development services about the missing middle, and so there's been some key suggestions coming from the home builders about how they think it would be easier to develop missing middle housing. So I think there's so much good information out there and it's such a active topic right now that I'm just thinking of ways how to get this out without having to wait a year till we have a consultant to tell us it. And so much of this we already know because we're already knee deep in the mud of it.
Yeah. So. And I guess to say one last thing on that and to try to wrap it in Brian's comment again is that we're having a staff retreat soon and trying to line up all of our priorities and timing of everything. But we'll be discussing whether or not and to what extent, if we have the ability to do some code updates specifically relating to this, so that we don't have to wait for 2 years before we roll out some of the changes that we may know are possibly going to be coming anyway. Because it seems like you're right. We've done a lot of work, and there's perhaps at least some things we could do to start opening up the flexibility a little bit right now. Thank you all.
Yeah, thank you. Super. Thanks, Vanilla. Thanks, everybody. Next up, we've got, we're going to talk about the restaurant court proposal. We have Jeffrey Barton from Mountain Housing. So this, you can fill us in on the scope. We've heard about this. Obviously the restaurant court project. We've heard about the property for many times. I think it actually has an active. I think it has an active housing trust fund allocation from a different project. So excited to see it back to see it in play and take it away.
And Jeffrey, before you start, if you don't mind, if I could just tee this up. So after your last meeting, I realized I should have brought this to your attention in my update. So I apologize for that. So this is a housing trust fund application for a piece of land, and Jeffrey will explain it, but basically for land procurement. And it is going to HCD on August 16th. We did have a discussion in July about it, but just a discussion. And currently it's on schedule to go to HCD August 16th and then City Council on the 23rd. This is a great case study of partly why we need to look at our policy. We have things in our policy and it can't fit everything. So I would love for you all to hear this and think about, add it to that store of information that you have about policy. And as we're thinking about policy and, when is it appropriate for, right now we have it that, City Council can be flexible on every application if they want, but it makes it very difficult to have a policy if you don't adhere to the policy and where's the line for things. So, yeah, and I guess that's all I wanted to say. And yeah, go ahead, Jeffrey. And Adeline here is here. Adeline Wolf is here with MHO.
Yeah, thank you, Sasha, and thanks, Barry, and committee members for having us to talk a little bit about this project that we're envisioning. Yeah, Sasha kind of teed it up great, and we can highlight some points of what we're requesting and how it doesn't currently align with the existing housing trust fund policy. But I just wanted to kind of, for those of you who aren't familiar with the site, I'd love to kind of show where that is. So if I can share my screen.
It's the box with the arrow pointing up, if you see that.
Yeah, got that.
And then it'll ask you, are you sharing a tab or a window? Yeah.
Not used to Google Meet. All right. So Restaurant Court is just off Tunnel Road. And this particular parcel, as Barry alluded to, was given a prior housing trust fund commitment of, I think, $1 million to a different developer who we are now under contract to purchase the property from. That proposal and what they were planning to do with the site is, at this point expired. What we are envisioning is entirely different. So to orient you to the location, it kind of plays in well to a lot of the themes that you all were having in prior discussions around, missing middle and the need for more multifamily. Right off Tunnel Road, here's Ingalls and then the mall down here. So zooming in a bit, the Mountaineer Inn is probably the easiest milestone. So it is, Restaurant Court is right alongside the Mountaineer Inn and goes up the hill. And we're talking about this parcel right here. It's 1.3 acres. So, and then the Board of Realtors now is in this building, and Longhorn Steakhouse further up the hill. So that's just to orient you on the site. What we have asked for, so our original housing trust fund request was for land acquisition and pre-development. Land acquisition is an eligible use of the housing trust fund policy. Pre-development really isn't, although it has, there was one precedent for that. So we have revised our request after seeking feedback from HCD to be land acquisition only. And so the current, the contract to purchase this property is $850,000. That's what we're asking the city to fund. The Housing Trust Fund policy has been used by Mountain Housing Opportunities many times over the years to produce affordable housing. The current moment that we're seeing makes some of the policy provisions, frankly, infeasible. We're seeing an increase in cost of land, and the commitment to repay loans at an early stage, such as land acquisition, is really hard to assess. So Our primary ask of the city would be for this to come in as a 0% deferred loan. We would likely, as part of this process of assembling the finances to build a development there, we would likely need some additional gap financing. And so we would go to other local partners and we could, work through how that looks like with the city and revisit repayment options as we get closer to a specific development plan. So our initial proposal that we're currently in the due diligence on would have somewhere between 50 and 60 affordable rental units, 100% affordable at 60% AMI and below. It would likely be a good candidate for a 4% or a 9% low-income housing tax credit. And it's, walkable to a lot of jobs. And because of that location, served by transit, walkable to jobs, we have a special component that we're proposing to include in this project, which is a set aside of units for youth aging out of foster care. There's a specific voucher called the Fyi voucher that our community does not currently get from HUD. So we've been in conversations with the Buncombe County Health and Human Services and the Housing Authority to assess the need for this type of voucher to serve this important population, as well as the Housing Authority's willingness to administer the vouchers if we're successful in getting them. So that kind of work is in process, but we're excited to try to include that population within this affordable housing development because of the location and because the target population of youth aging out of foster care are so vulnerable to becoming homeless. So that's kind of a broad overview. We came today really to seek some informal input, guidance from you all, and see if there are other aspects that we should look to include, given that this is at an early stage, so there's an opportunity to help shape what this development eventually becomes. Addie, anything to add at this point before we kick it over to the committee?
I don't think so. I think Jeffrey really did a good job hitting the nail on the head. I'll just emphasize, we're coming with this request with the knowledge that transit-oriented sites like this are really dwindling in availability in our community. So this request really comes with the impetus for not only securing a site like this for multifamily development rather than some other commercial or less dense development, but securing it and guaranteeing that it will be affordable housing. So that's just kind of the background of this request. But like Jeffrey said, looking forward to hearing what you guys think about it and hearing your feedback.
Cool, thank you. Yeah, thank you, Jeffrey and Adelaide. I guess, yeah, committee members, I guess, can you, maybe Sasha, maybe first, if you could just fill in, what is the policy around land acquisition, and is there bond funding left for, I was just thinking, the two different ways would be, loan them the money to do it, or the city acquire the site, as city held land. So how does the bond money, is there any bond money left for land acquisition?
Not really, no. And I think, we're getting a lot of calls and requests hey, I heard you have leftover bond money. So that's partly why we want to do a call for proposals and just kind of do them all together.
Sure.
And we advised MHO a few months ago, bring this under the existing Housing Trust Fund policy. And so, yes, the Housing Trust Fund does allow for land acquisition. So that's an eligible expense. So that's not a problem. And they previously had some pre-development expenses and they've taken that out. So that helps as well. I think where it's the two things that are, because they're early, they're trying to secure this land. And often the way the policy is written, usually most folks, and I think Jeffrey will back me up on this, most usually have your land secured, or you have a really long due diligence period, like a year or something like that. So And they don't have that in this case. So the two things that, the policy does ask for you to have other commitments from other bodies in place, or, that at least you're in that process so that it's not, so right now we're being asked first before anybody else has secured any commitments. So that I think feels risky for council, and it's not exactly how the policy is written. And the second part is the repayment period. The policy, or repayment in general, the policy basically says you can, for special terms, we call special loan terms, you're either paying 0% interest, but you're making some payback, or you're paying 2% interest only with a deferred principal. So I think under this application, they're asking for the kind of zero interest and not the repayments in question. Let's put it that way. And they're just being very honest and open with their pro forma, and I get that. So I have started looking at other housing trust funds and looking at how these other things are set up, because some housing trust funds say, okay, for these kinds of projects, it's loans, these kinds of projects, it's grants. I think our portfolio does have some other projects where they have 0% deferred, or maybe even there may even be some grants in that portfolio. But generally we do have some kind of repayment. So I think those are the really two big issues with this project. And so, and also being asked first before anybody else is asked. That's kind of always council's been feeling a little, it's difficult when we're always the first person in and maybe funding the most. So
I think that's good kind of background on the compatibility with Housing Trust Fund. And it was good to see earlier in this meeting that there's going to be some, momentum in the near term to updating Housing Trust Fund policies. And I will say that the current Housing Trust Fund policy does have a provision under the special terms that waiver of any payment during the loan term will be considered only if extremely low households are being served by the project and the project could not be developed without that concession. So there is, a kind of mechanism, and we were hopeful that, the ambition to serve youth aging out of foster care would sort of tick that box. Again, this is we're upfront about the fact that this is early in the process. Since, as you all know, the tax credit application timelines are set in Raleigh, our option period doesn't really align with that application process. So we need to be able to take down the land prior to getting an allocation of tax credits, which is not historically been the case, but is kind of the present reality, just given the price of real estate and the Asheville, urban core.
What do you have you? I don't remember. Are you based some of the site development? Do you have any anticipation of what you see site development costs are, or a budget for that? Just to, because that's the one thing I just feel is the buying the land early on, and then probably the need will be for additional asks later. And I know, I just think of all the land the city has done this with already for their portfolio, that they're sitting on a lot of land that now the money is going to have to go to fund the projects. And this one I don't know, it just feels so early on, but is there what other options, because usually I guess we look at housing trust funds supposed to be the last option to go to. Do you have other options? Do you have other options for acquiring it, the financing for that the city can just play in later, or is this kind of needed to make this happen?
For the acquisition, the city is needed to make this happen. And while Sasha is right that we are coming to the city as our early partner on this project, I'll say that other funding partners, the county and Dogwood, have come in as the first partner for land acquisition outside the city limits. So it is something that the other funding partners in the affordable housing arena are doing in recognition of just the importance of really tying up that land and guaranteeing that it'll be affordable housing. The legal mechanism that the city has is a deed of trust that that can be placed on the property, and a deed restriction for affordable housing. So yeah, that is what the city would be getting by making this investment. And I guess to speak to the point of, is this any different than some of the other land acquisitions the city's made? It is. We have, as part of our due diligence while we're under contract to purchase this property, we've done some pretty extensive analysis on compatibility with the tax credit program. We kind of have a streamlined approach to our pre-development in preparation for a tax credit project. We're being realistic about what the program is. We're not saying this is a mixed use site. We have a very focused goal of providing housing units, which aligns with the recently adopted Tunnel Road Corridor study to add housing in this area. So those are the things that we've been doing as part of our due diligence that, because we're not seeking pre-development funds, are really coming, it's being funded by us, and we are pursuing grant funding from other local partners for that. The other thing that came up at HCD and is in the HCD staff report is the county's funding cycle and their affordable housing service program isn't open right now. I have reached out to them, and they've said there's not funding for like an out of cycle request. So we would likely go and apply for the HSP, which would be open in December, January. But our option expires in October. So that's kind of the timeline we're under right now, is finding the funds to purchase this by October to make it a development.
Is the ask? I haven't seen the application. Is it asking for 100%, or is it a percentage of the acquisition?
It's asked. We are under contract for $850,000. The ask that we're putting forward to the city is $850,000. There will be closing costs and other miscellaneous expenses that we would cover. So, but that is what we are asking for. Yes.
What does everyone think about that? I mean, the idea of not as much. I guess there's two questions: just the specific, but more of like the policy. Like, okay, housing trust funds allowed for land acquisition. What are we? I don't know if there's no real guidelines in the housing trust fund of like what percentage it's supposed to fund, or if there's additional, like it doesn't restrict future asks. But what do we?
I'll just say real quick on that point, Barry, is that the policy says it has a limit of like 20,000 per unit.
Yes.
So, which may be outdated now. I don't, that's like another example. And I think the 850 kind of falls in that range.
Sure.
There is like a potential future ask, which would kick that up to like 32,000, I think, per unit. Yeah. So I'll be quiet. I'll let y'all talk.
Yeah.
I think the population that it's serving should act as sort of maybe an exception to some of the policy, and the unique nature of the actual location of it, especially for the population that's being served. I mean, I don't know, the stars only align so much for a project like this, and I definitely support who it's trying to serve and where.
This is Scott. I don't know all the ins and outs of the housing trust fund in terms of the policy, but I mean, I guess on just the base proposition of, land acquisition or taking site control, that seems critical for any project. So, I mean, if the housing trust fund has that ability or that mechanism in it to, enable someone to take site control and land acquisition, that seems really critical.
Yeah, I agree too. I mean, this sounds like a great project. There's just protections in place, the deed restrictions, deed of trust. It's good to highlight. Hopefully the project makes it all the way through, but if it doesn't, it's not like a total loss, certainly. So, yeah, we have maybe more information to gather, but it sounds like a wonderful project.
Cool. What do you need from would help from us? Because I mean, I've heard, like I said, I've heard some buzz about the project, and like there's some resistance to it. I think it could be from even our conversation earlier about missing middle. The city doesn't really do anything with speed, so that to have like a timeline, like, hey, we need to close by October, certainly puts like a little bit of like that's like light speed, per city city world. What would help from us? Because I've heard, like I said, I've heard some resistance to it from within different city world, orbits. What do you think would help? I mean, it sounds like it's a good project. It's just like that speed of it, and then coming in so early on for the city sounds like there's some resistance. I don't know what would help. I mean, what would help? Because it sounds like the policy. It sounds like Housing Trust Fund allows it. It sounds like it's within the scope of per unit. So I mean, that as far as policy, it sounds like it aligns. For getting anything through, there's a lot of lobbying that has, back end lobbying that has to happen between all sorts of people. So what do you think would help make this, other than lobbying the seller to extend your period for longer? Because that sure would help.
Yeah, I mean, we always, when we're have a property under option, we're going through due diligence, we leave everything on the table once we believe in a site. Honestly, I think what could help is just sharing any recommendations or even hesitations with HCD, passing that along, because this body does represent the affordable housing expertise in the community. So, we're certainly willing and open to work through any hesitations. I think what I've heard, the only one I've really heard is this is early, and the repayment strategy is unclear because it's so early. So I guess, my answer so far has been, whenever MHO has a site under ownership and a viable financing plan, we haven't walked away from a deal. We have a track record of delivering on sites that we get excited about. We've been doing that for 34 years. So that's kind of, it is uncomfortable since it's so early, but I would hope that the city is, supportive and can be supportive in this way. So that, I guess that maybe that's a convoluted answer, but yeah, recommendation to HCD or just any feedback about what this group sees and how it fits in with where we might be with our policies in 2 years, but not yet there today. That feedback would be helpful.
Okay. What is our, Sasha, what is our, like, that's why I think I'd asked about the bond money. What is our Housing Trust Fund balance? And is it, because for this to work, does this need the allocation for the bond into the Housing Trust Fund?
No.
Okay.
No, I did go through that with finance. And there wasn't, in our kind of our spreadsheet of what's coming in the Housing Trust Fund, just that we already know about, there was, I think it was 1 point, I can't remember exactly, already set aside for this site.
Got it.
With the previous developer. So we're actually in good shape for the money part.
Cool. Paul?
Yeah, let's just say land's acquired, we get over this. Like, what do you think the biggest challenges are if we can make it over that hurdle?
The tax credit process is a competitive application cycle if this is a 9% tax credit. So we oftentimes have to apply 2 and 3 times before we get a successful award. Our recently completed development in East Haven, in Swananoa, East Haven Apartments, took us 4 times at the state to get tax credits. So having site control allows us to sort of put in year after year for that competitive resource. The the fallback is this site is also viable for the non-competitive 4% tax credit. It's quite a bit smaller than a typical 4% deal. So in that case, if we go the 4% route, the biggest hurdle is going to be securing local gap funding to leverage that 4% tax credit. So that's what the pro forma that we included with our housing trust fund application is kind of that worst case of just how much local gap subsidy would this require if it were a 4% tax credit. So I guess the answer is, yeah, if we can get lucky in the 9% application process, then there's not hugely significant hurdles. The biggest hurdle remaining would be commitments of local gap funding.
Scott.
Yeah, I was just going to speak briefly to it piqued my curiosity that, part of the population proposed to be served is, teens aging out of foster care. It's very, it's interesting and it's very timely because AHAC, myself and Barry, I think maybe one or two other folks actually got a direct inquiry from someone with Buncombe County guardian ad litem last summer. I could forward you the contact information just to kind of put people in touch. But I think that's a great opportunity to serve what sounds like a population that often falls through the cracks, either into homelessness or really otherwise stressed or sketchy housing situations. So I'll forward you that information shortly.
Thank you. Yes, please do. And it's worth noting that the need for units for this population in this community is not huge. And so the opportunity with one project to really, end homelessness among youth aging out of foster care is could be really transformational.
Paul.
And through the development, is there any kind of baked in additional support for that population?
I'm sorry, we're having some internet issues on our end. Could you repeat that?
Yeah, certainly. Yeah. Is there any sort of additional support, possible to be baked in for that population?
Yeah, I think we were in ongoing conversations with Buncombe County to figure out what kind of support services would help set this population up for success. And so that would then drive programming in the building, whether we need to set aside a acoustically isolated room with a caseworker, or what types of on-site services really help. We're kind of working that out with people in the community who are much more expert on the needs of this population than we are. We're kind of in the learning stage right now.
Okay. So an issue, I'm just looking at our time. I got to keep us moving. Do we, are we open as a committee to, we normally don't vote in or chime in on applications like this, but do we want to, since I think it could help their support, are we open to making a motion to recommend this, since there's funding already allocated in the Housing Trust Fund towards this project, that we think this does align with Housing Trust Fund policy? Are we open for a motion on that? Okay, how about this? I'll make a motion that Amanda, we don't normally do that. Oh, Chris, I'll let you.
Just a quick procedural question. This is a site that I had worked on with the previous developer. I've also given a little bit of information with MHO with my experience on it. I don't know if it's appropriate for me to just recuse myself from any kind of a recommendation in this situation, or if it matters. I don't know. I think it's a great job. I think it's a great project and a great location.
Yeah.
And so I'm excited that Mountain Housing is working on it, but I just didn't understand procedural.
Yeah, I don't know, since we don't normally, but I would think you'd better just to, Sasha, you think?
Yeah, well, I think, if you think it's possible that you could be working on this project, I think it'd be better just to recuse yourself.
Yeah.
Good deal.
Okay, well, I'm just going to make a quick motion, because we don't normally do this, but a motion that AHAC, AHAC thinks 16 Restaurant Court project is within the scope of the use of the Housing Trust Fund for land acquisition, And given that there is prior housing trust fund funds allocated to this project, we would recommend HCD approve this housing trust fund application.
I'll second that.
Okay. Any?
Can we say to the site?
Yeah, to the site. Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we change the wording to the site. Okay. So you have a second. So any discussion on that? So I'll do a roll call vote. And I'm just going to call for everyone. I'm not sure who's in on the call right now. Scott.
Aye.
Emily.
Aye.
David.
Aye.
Paul.
Aye.
Joe.
Aye.
Tawana. Brian. Babs.
Aye.
Myself, aye. Chris Day is gonna excuse himself from this. So do we have, what is that? That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So that is, yes, we do have a quorum for that, right? Yep. Is that right? We have 7 ayes without Chris.
I'm sorry, I was paying attention.
Let's see, Scott, it's Scott Adams, Emily, David, Paul, Joe, myself, and I think Babs. Yeah, Babs. So I think we do have 7. So motion passes. So thank you. I hope, thanks for all the work you do, guys. And I hope this site, especially since it's been in talk for so long and there's funding in place, I hope, I hope you have success with it.
Thank you so much. Very much appreciated.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, everybody. I'm gonna move along. So we have community. So we've got technically about 20 minutes left. And our big things, I know we've got update, this community development updates we were discussing. We've got, I do want to talk just quickly, after that about our seats. We have 1 seat open and kind of fill in some of who we have applied. And then do we have any public comment waiting, just so I know for time management?
I don't think so.
No, we don't have any public comments on the line, but we did have one written public comment.
Yeah,
Okay.
we're not going to
send that to Sasha.
Yeah, we won't deal with that at this point, but yeah. Do you want me to give my update real quick?
Yes, yeah, I'll let you go through with updates.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay. All right. I did this as a PowerPoint again. It's shorter this time. And let's see. So just a couple department staffing updates. The Homeless Strategy Division has 3 positions open right now, and the deadline's August 21st, in case you know anybody who would be a good fit for that. There's also a home ARP position, which is a grant-funded position, a temporary, I think it's 2 or 3 years, is posted as well. And we have an affordable housing specialist starting on Monday. I'm very excited about this, and we'll bring him to the next meeting, and he's bringing lots of experience in housing finance and underwriting to our department, which is great. And I think we're really going to dig into the Housing Trust Fund and monitoring and getting our arms around those systems. First thing, is first on his work plan. So I'm excited for that. And land use incentive grant policy. So we went through those 4 policy items and talked about, we really, Housing Trust Fund is kind of on the front burner, and this would be kind of more winter. You all did see, I think, I can't remember if we talked about it visually or in the meeting. I think we did, but the micro units on Hillyard Avenue that went to City Council a couple months ago. That was 80 units total, 16 affordable for 20% at 80% AMI for 20 years. We do know that there's another project, I think it was even in the paper recently, coming through, same developer, 230 units on Aston. So actually not far from that first site, a little bit further east. 230 units, 20% would get us, I have not seen an application yet. An application has not come in. So, but 20% would get us to, I think, 46 units. And through that last policy go round, I was probably still in an interim basis at that point, or just transferring to being permanent. I heard rumblings from different folks, nothing official, but kind of questions around, should micro units, and just as a reminder, what those are basically like one room. You do have a private bathroom, you do have a bathroom, but there's a sink, room for I think a mini fridge, microwave, and that's it. And then there's each floor has a kitchen, a full kitchen that you can use. So I think there's a real question because our policy does not, our Luigi policy now does not anticipate this use. We don't have a separate rent line for this. So the rents are studio slash efficiency, 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom, the rent limits. So we don't have a rent for a micro unit. Basically you get the full, you get the full benefit as if you were providing an efficiency. And so I think Barry and I haven't had a chance to talk about this a lot, but I don't think we can revise the policy before that project gets to council, but I think feedback from AHAC would be very helpful, and maybe we could actually have this as an agenda item in September, so you could start thinking about it. And if you have any thoughts now, Margie gave me some of her thoughts in writing yesterday, but should there be a different rent rate? Should it, council does have the ability to negotiate what the benefit is they actually agree to in their resolution. In the policy, it clearly says, council can adjust this. And I think this is one of those situations where this is not the normal kind of thing. And, they could say, we're not going to give you the full number of years of benefit, or you don't get 100% of your taxes. We're going to refund 75% or 50, whatever that is. And I don't, just knowing staff time, I don't want to get into too many, I love math, but too many different complications or calculations, but would love feedback from you all. And maybe if you give me any of your initial thoughts, either today or by email, feel free for all to call me. And then I can try to, in the next month, bring back some more solid ideas to you, and we could talk about it. So I'd love to hear from you.
So we got some Scott.
I just want to make a note that there is a public comment now in the queue.
Okay.
Yeah, and just committee members, I just want to be time sensitive because we have a few more things. So just can kind of I do want to hear your stuff, but maybe talk fast.
Yeah. So no, it's it's an interesting question, and my kind of quick commentary on it is, micro units, it's basically sort of a 21st century version or variant on single room occupancy, which is, I think, that's kind of another talking point of the full spectrum of housing options. So I think that's probably just a good discussion to have, and as to how you peg it to a specific rent rate. I guess you just look at the prevailing cost of a micro unit or an SRO somewhere else. But I think it's an interesting concept, certainly, again, just in trying to get that full spectrum of housing. So for that, I think it's innovative.
Emily.
Yeah, agreed. I think it's innovative as well. I'd be curious, is this project also 0 parking spaces, similar to the?
I believe so.
Okay.
It'll be at, just if any of you are curious, I think it's at the design review committee meeting for informal review on the 3rd Thursday. So that'd be August 18th. If you want to watch that, or even look at the materials. And yeah.
And 20% is affordable?
That's the baseline. If you're applying for this policy, you have to do 20%. So that's what I'm assuming. I haven't seen an application yet, but I'm assuming that's what they would propose.
Okay. And sorry, what's the definition again of affordable as far as AMI goes?
80% and below for this policy.
Okay. So it's not that many affordable units, but
well, it's 46. So.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But that's another idea. It could be like a different AMI. Like if you're doing micro units, maybe, we want to see different AMIs or some, some at 60%. And I would say I totally support all kinds of, thank you, Scott, for saying it. I do support all different kinds of housing types. I think it's great to have all the kinds.
Yeah. My thoughts, I'd look at the math, because again, when I was thinking about our first part of the conversation, Sasha, when you brought it up to me earlier, I was curious on like how the math actually totals up, because if you compare a project, let's say the amount of units of this, let's just look at the Hillyard, an 80 unit development, and you compare it to an 80 unit development elsewhere. That's a larger project, because essentially the taxes, the LUIG is based on the tax value. So 80 units of smaller units is going to have a lower tax value than 80 units of larger. So essentially the LUIG is lower. So I'd be curious, like, just to compare like how the math works on that. That way we know what, if there's really a policy that needs to be adjusted, or kind of because it is tied to property tax value, and property taxes assessments are going to be lower on an 80 units of small units than 80 units of large. It might kind of already be built in. So I'd be curious just to look at the math of that.
That's great. Thank you. That's a great idea.
Paul?
Yeah, so the project has a kind of very small kitchen in a unit, like not a real kitchen, but there's a shared kitchen. And I don't think I caught like how many people based on the occupancy are sharing like a kitchen.
Oh, I see. I have in the new project, I haven't memorized the floor plan yet. There's actually two buildings. They're split between two buildings. I can speak to the 217 Hillyard one. It was, I want to say 5 floors. So maybe like 12 units per floor. So 12 people sharing a kitchen. I can pull up the floor plans or send them to you too if you want. But
yeah.
So it could be 12, but if it's double occupancy, it could be 24, because 12 units. But if there's 2 people in the unit, then we're maybe.
Interesting question. I hadn't really envisioned 2 people, and but
I think I was thinking the closest project we have in the city to compare this to, essentially there is a micro unit project. It's the Hiawassee conversion that happened years back. So I mean that'd be and so that one, as I've watched it over the years, there are condos that sell for more. They're the most affordable little condos. They're downtown. That I can't remember for call it actually may have parking. But I think that's maybe something we should look at, like how that has worked out, because I think overall it's been a successful project, and basically it was just hotel room conversions. So maybe we'll just take a look at like what rents look like there, like what price of those condos has been. But that's probably the closest I can pick up an existing micro unit project. So
it sounds solvable. I just I'm thinking we don't want to disadvantage people financially.
Sure.
For not having access to a proper kitchen. And if 12 or 24 people are all trying to have dinner within a few hours of each other, I don't know, maybe it builds great communities. There's certainly a spectrum of thoughts that come to mind, but yeah, I just want to make sure we thought that through.
Hey guys, you have 8 minutes left.
Okay. Thanks. All right. Any other questions, comments? Is there anything else in your updates that you want to breeze through besides this?
Just real quick. Well, I've already told you about, we're coming back to you with affordable housing bond plan. 319, we talked about this at the last meeting. It is going to be at HCD next week, 2 weeks, August 16th. It was similar to MHO. They had a discussion last month and they're looking to vote this month. So nothing has really changed since you all saw these slides last month. But yeah. And then that's all I have.
Okay. Cool. I'm gonna try unless there's any other questions on updates so we can wrap up. So move to the next stuff. Nope. Okay. Thanks, Sasha, for that being so organized. We really helps answer so many questions without us having to ask a lot. So I really appreciate the organization and the thought that goes behind this. And yeah, really appreciate the work you've done so far. It's really nice to have someone who's designated to afford, to the affordable housing needs.
Thanks. He'll get sick of me eventually, I'm sure.
I think what I'm going to do, if it's okay, I'm going to skip through. I'm not. We have on our gender build and connect task force, but I think we're going to just skip that, and we'll update next time just for time's sake. And I will for build though. I will reach out for planning, and I think we'll try to connect with them because I think that will be really helpful for the discussion of missing middle. I wanted to chat quick on. So we have open. What I basically want to talk about is the structure of what we feel we need to fill on the committee. And we only have about 2 minutes to really discuss this, but we have basically, I do also want to take a moment to really thank Jo Eichelhammer for her support and commitment for so many years on the committee. She's been on this, I think, as long as I have, and she's rolling off and is not, and I believe you've asked, and we're going to continue to remain on the Connect task force, which task force are allowed to have outside people. So, you're still going to be around, but I just want to, thank you so much for your support over the years, and maybe even ask from you, like here, we're needing to basically fill your seat. What should we be looking for to fill your big shoes?
Oh, goodness. Thank you, Barry. I appreciate it. I don't know how big my shoes are, but it has been my pleasure to serve on the committee with all of you all of these years. We did start, I think at this point, it was more like 6.5 years ago. Mm-hmm. So back at the beginning of 2016. And yeah, and I hope to be able to continue on the task force to, be able to stay connected in that way, since this, has been a long-term commitment for me. As far as filling my spot goes, I don't know. I feel like I'm, somewhat unique in that I've got the employment on the national level, but living in Asheville for many years at this point. So if you just had, some good, strong community applicants for the position who don't necessarily have a local buy-in, although I do now in that I'm serving on the Homeward Bound board of directors. But just, I don't know, just try to broaden that net as much as you can. So okay. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah. Thank you, too. Anyone else have any thoughts? What I can do is I'll share, because we have to make a recommendation, I think, in the next couple of weeks. So it's at the application time's closed. I think there's about 6 or 7 applications. I don't think it's not normally linked. Like sometimes we've had the link of, I just received them, I think yesterday, right? I think we just got them, Sasha. So maybe I'll share them with the committee, because this decision of who we recommend will have to be made before our next meeting. But I know we've been talking about what roles, rather than individual people, what roles we think there should be. So, we've got a finance, we've got developers, we've got a mix, but I do think Joe's perspective has been really unique of having kind of from a national policy level and connecting to that. And I didn't see that in this round. But I think we can, again, there's some of these procedural stuff, but I think we can share that. I think we can share with y'all the applications and then try to get some input. So I'll get with Sasha on this offline. Because it wasn't, sometimes it's really easy for standouts, and sometimes this was, I was finding a little bit more difficult looking through this, so I'm going to lean on some help. The other thing I do want to ask, and then we will open the public hearing, I want to put this out there. So neither Andy or Margie are at this meeting, but we've discussed, and I do, so we do over the next year, and who we're feeding on the committee, we do need to talk about, new, this will be my last year on the committee, so we do need to talk about for new chairs and vice chairs of who wants to kind of assume and become the leadership roles in AHAC moving forward. And so, and I've had some discussions with them, and they're not quite sure. We'll have this further discussion, but I just want to kind of put it out there that if there's any one of you who are interested in being more active in some kind of true leadership role in the committee, it'd be a good time to start to discuss that, because we're going to need to kind of work on the plan to transition, and then just have more spread out leadership. So I just want to put that out there. I think we better just move to public comment. But I just want to put that out there, and we will share the link to current applications so y'all can look through that. Okay, public comment. You said we have one waiting, and then we have one in writing. Is that correct?
Yeah, we have one. It's from Greg with the last number on his phone, 3548, and he has 2 minutes to speak or 3 minutes.
Okay. 3, I guess.
Okay. All right, and he is live now.
Okay.
You can go ahead and speak, Greg, if you're on the line still. Are you there, Greg?
Not here. Is that Greg? Like Greg Borum?
I think so. Yeah.
Good. All right.
Greg, your phone might be muted.
Did you say we have one written? Do you want to go through that?
No, we
Oh,
don't.
we don't? Okay.
No.
Okay.
I'll talk to you about it afterwards.
Got it.
Are you guys okay with me closing out the phone then? Greg,
Yeah,
are you there?
I'm fine with that. We can ask Greg to email in or speak to next. Sorry, Greg, if you're out there, we're skipping you. We love you. Okay. So there's a couple of, just take a note on the events that is on the agenda section. There's a the Affordable Housing Fair is September 10th. There's a meetup on August 9th at, I think it's at Archetype North, I think I saw. But anyway, just take a look at that. So if there's anything, because it is, one thing we did learn as committee members, it is really important to be involved in the community and speak in public hearings in favor of things, go to meetings and speak up in favor, because there's so much of the, NIMBYism that it's really important that we kind of offer a counter voice, or else that voice gets lost.
Barry, can I ask you all, you talked about this at the very beginning of the meeting, that you all have the freedom to meet in person at your next meeting. It would be in the first floor conference room because of the technology setup. Is that what you all would like to do? I don't know if you want to take a poll right now.
Yeah, I'm in favor of that. Does anyone, I don't think we need to vote on it. It doesn't have to be a roll call vote. So if anyone wants to, if you want to maybe give a thumbs up, if you're okay with going live for the September 1st meeting. Okay, cool. We'll plan on that. I think Sasha, you said you would not be able to attend.
Yeah, I'm dropping my son off at college, but I will. I may be able to call in. Nikki will be there for sure.
Okay, and then maybe you'll fill me in offline if there's I'm not sure of the mixed technology. As far as I understand, the city doesn't have a real way to mix the technology of
Not yet. We're getting there. We'll record the video, but it just won't be live streamed.
Yeah, and then the guidelines I've been shared with is that right now, because we can go live, but the city is looking at coming up with some policies so it could change, is my understanding. But for the moment, let's plan on live in September, which would be great. So thanks for bringing that up again, Sasha.
Sure.
All right. Well, thank you all. I certainly appreciate it. Good to see you. Again, thank you, Joe, for all your service, and we're going to miss you, but we're going to stay connected. And I was at the last meeting, so welcome, Emily. I would like to connect with you, figure out which meeting. I think Connect is going to go live also with their meetings, is what I've understood. So, all right. Well, thank you everybody for attending. Sorry again, Greg, if we missed you. We'll see y'all later. Thanks.
Thank you.